There's something about hosting your first Thanksgiving in your 20s that feels like a tiny rite of passage. Not in a big dramatic way, but in a way like you've watched your mom or your grandma or your aunts or even your uncles or grandpa or father host a big group of people before for dinner, and you're ready to take on this tradition as well but aren't quite sure where to get started. That's why I filmed this video today. I'm 27 now and I've hosted my fair share of Thanksgivings throughout my 20s, so I wanted to give some advice to anyone who may not have hosted their own dinner yet on some of my tried and true tips to making cooking a Thanksgiving meal for your loved ones a tad bit easier. I used to think hosting meant everything had to be perfect. The timing, the table, the food. But the more I lean into homemaking and learn my way around the kitchen, the more I realize it's really about presence. There's something grounding about taking 20 minutes to knead dough with your hands, letting it be messy or uneven, and just learning to be okay with the imperfections in what you bring to the table. What really matters is that you're nourishing and feeding your family, and no one expects you to be a 5-star chef. So join me in my kitchen today as I walk you through several of my favorite Thanksgiving meals you can prep in advance and a few things that bring that special feeling to the table. The first thing I want to show you guys how to make today are my milk buns. This is my very first recipe that I have had members of my family request that I make for holiday events. So I thought, what better recipe to kick off this video with than one that I know will get you guys the same reaction from your families. Milk buns are made with a tang zong, which you saw me making at the beginning of this video, which is essentially a combination of milk and flour that you whisk together and heat over the stove just until it forms a paste, and then you mix that into the rest of your bread ingredients, and it gives it just a bit more moisture. You want to mix all of your ingredients together in your stand mixer preferably, although you can do this by hand, and you'll knead those together for 20 minutes until you can perform a window pane test where you look through the dough and it doesn't rip, but you can see the sunlight on the other side. I love the idea that holiday hosting doesn't have to mean running out for brand new decor or matching sets. Underconsumption, to me, isn't about depriving yourself. It's about creating a home slowly, piece by piece, with things that feel lived in and loved already. I thrifted this quilt last week off of Facebook Marketplace, had it shipped to me from a state away, and I think that it just built the perfect base for my table. Yellow's my favorite color, so this pop of yellow was really inspiring to me, and the rest of this tablescape is thrifted, from the literal table and chairs to the plates, which came from my mom. She doesn't remember where she got them from, but she's had them in our plate collection at our house for a while. And these candlesticks are also from the thrift store. I didn't thrift the pumpkins, those are grown, but I found them at my local grocer. So I'm proud to say I brought this tablescape together from a mostly thrifted basis. And then I just played around with adding some finishing touches like these napkins, which I thrifted a few years back. I tied some ribbon around them. This is some yellow velvet, and then laid those over the top of my plates. And I just enjoy finding ways to add extra layers to my tablescape until it feels really lived and loved and full. Now that the dough has rested and doubled in size, it's time for my favorite part, which is shaping the buns. It's the most technical step, but also the most calming. I put my bread on my scale, figure out how much it weighs, and then I divide that number by 9, which is the total number of buns we'll end up with, and I get to work portioning those out so that I have 9 equally sized balls. And once that's done, it's all about rolling this dough out into a long rectangle, folding that rectangle down in thirds. So you'll bring the top down to about 2/3 of the way, and then the bottom up to cover the rest of that, like so. You'll turn it 90 degrees, give it another long roll out as long as you can. It doesn't need to be perfect though. You'll roll that down into a cylinder and then pull it into a U shape and begin the process of using the tension of your counters to pull that dough into a tight ball. You really want that tight texture so that your dough has some structure to it, and when you bite into it you can really see those swirls and spirals in the gluten. So you'll see me do this a few more times. Feel free to come back and reference this technique as you go to make yours, but most important is to just have fun with it. You really can't mess up bread as long as you're giving it the proper time to rise. Here are all 9 of the dough balls. I'm covering them with just a little bit of water, and then I put the towel over them and set them to the side again, and I let them rise until it's time to bake at the very end of the meal. The first Thanksgiving dinner I ever cooked completely by myself was during COVID, and I remember sitting down with a notebook and literally timetabling every single dish down to the minute, like mashed potatoes 242 to 256. It was chaos, but also kind of hilarious looking back. Since then, I've learned that prepping things ahead is the real secret. This sweet potato casserole is one of those dishes that actually gets better when it hangs out in the fridge for a day or two. You can make it completely in advance and pop it in the oven right before everyone gets hungry. I mostly followed the half-baked harvest version of this recipe, minus the bacon. I did the bacon in the past and I really liked it, but I just forgot to get it today, so left that out. And here you'll see me combining all of the base ingredients: the sweet potato, the honey, some milk, an egg, vanilla, cinnamon, salt, bourbon. I think that those are all of the things that were included in this. And then on top of it goes a really delicious streusel, pecans and some flour and some sage, and it comes together in a really delicious sweet potato casserole that is equal parts sweet and savory. So feel free to incorporate the bacon into yours if you'd like, but it also goes really great without. sauce will always have a place on my Thanksgiving table because of my grandma and grandpa. Every Thanksgiving, my grandma would make a little bowl just for my grandpa. No one else in the family really touched it, but we all knew that the cranberry sauce was out for him. Even when I was too young to appreciate it, I remember just watching her serve it to him with this tiny smile. It's funny how certain dishes just become a part of your family's fabric. So even now, in my own home, cranberry sauce feels like a piece of him sitting here with us. I personally omit a lot of the sugar from recipes I find online because I just don't like to include as much sugar in my home. So here I just tasted the cranberry sauce once I had it simmered down and added a little bit of honey at the end. It did turn out a tad bit sour, so in hindsight I may have added a bit more, but you can always add more you can't take out. That's my motto in the kitchen. For smaller Thanksgivings, especially when you're hosting for the first time, roasting a chicken instead of a full turkey is such a lifesaver. To this day, I've never done a turkey, but I have done my fair share of chickens. So, reminder that you don't have to stick exactly to the traditions. You can find ways to tweak recipes to suit what you're comfortable with. And for me, that's roasting a tinier chicken instead of a full turkey. I'm stuffing it with my mother-in-law's famous stuffing. It's just a bit of oats, some butter, salt, pepper, sage, and some chopped up onions. The sage really makes it, and then it all roasts inside the cavity of the chicken and seeps up all of the yummy juices that the chicken drips while it's in the oven. I'm just drizzling it with some butter here, covering it with some salt and pepper, and into the oven it goes. On to candying some pecans for a salad recipe I found on Pinterest and I'm actually trying for the first time. Salad's one of those things I like to play around with. I have a few tried and true recipes, but you also can't go wrong with throwing a bunch of really delicious fruits and vegetables together. So I'm starting the crumble of this salad and the crunchy aspect by mixing all of these ingredients together with some pecans and popping them in the oven for I'd say about 5 to 10 minutes just to crisp up, and then I took them out and let them cool off. This salad is another great make-ahead dish because it doesn't use delicate greens. The shaved Brussels sprouts actually act like the base of the salad, so you can dress it earlier in the day and let everything marinate in the fridge, and that way it'll get a bit more flavor to it anyways. I love this dish because of the color it brings to the table. The apples, the pomegranate seeds, everything is cut up super tiny or shaved very finely and just leaves this perfect texture on your plate of fresh ingredients as opposed to everything else for Thanksgiving that is quite cooked down and mushy. This all has a ton of texture and zing to it still. I'm mixing together this dressing here that is a bit of olive oil, lemon, apple cider vinegar, mustard, and some salt and pepper. So it comes together to be this tangy, really delicious dressing over all of your crunchy vegetables and fruit. The milk buns are ready to go in the oven now that they've been rising. The first time I'd say for about an hour, hour and a half, and the second time for another hour, hour and a half. My kitchen was quite warm, but if your kitchen is a bit colder, just make sure to rest it on top of the stove or somewhere that has a bit more heat so that they don't take you all day. I just brushed them with some milk, and now I'm popping them in the oven. Make sure that you have your oven set a bit lower. I actually accidentally threw these in the oven when my chicken was roasting at 425, so they got a tad bit more color than I normally like, but still tasted delicious. And then I'm brushing them with a combination of butter and maple syrup, and then at the very end I sprinkle them with a handful of Maldon sea salt. They turn out so delicious with this sweet salty combo brushed and sprinkled over the top. For your first Thanksgiving, smaller desserts are such a good idea. They're easier, they're less pressure, and honestly, people love a handheld sweet just as much as they love a big slice of pie. You can't go wrong with a decadent brownie, and I have made mine into a bit of a Thanksgiving brownie by making a pecan pie topping. Just chop up some pecans and then I mix them in a bowl with some butter and honey, a sprinkle of salt, and they come together into this sweet, salty, mouthful goodness. You really can't go wrong with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt. As I've been putting this Thanksgiving menu together, I keep coming back to the idea of underconsumption, creating a holiday that feels warm and abundant without the excess. No expensive decor, no overwhelming number of dishes, just cozy food, a thrifted table, and the people who make your home feel like a home. If you're hosting your first Thanksgiving, I hope this video reminds you that simple can be special and slow can be sacred. Thanks for spending the day with me.